Hello, hello. I'm Kyriana and welcome to this video. Today we're going to be starting a new tradition, I hope, of obscure fairy tales, those stories that convey us to distant lands and fill our hearts with joy, but ones that other people might not have heard of as much. So to kick off this tradition, go ahead and get yourself some tea, pull up a chair, and we'll be talking about George MacDonald. So George MacDonald is a Scottish writer who is best known for works like Fantasties, At the Back of the North Wind, The Princess and the Goblin. So quite a few of these like chivalric romance and fairy tale medieval setting type books. Things that predate our contemporary modern idea of the genre of fantasy, but things that did influence writers like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien in the middle of the 20th century when fantasy was really getting started. So he also worked closely with Lewis Carroll, and his daughter Alice was one of the major inspirations behind Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Interesting trivia right there. In terms of George MacDonald's stories, one of the reasons why I wanted to choose his work is not only that I really enjoy it and I think it conveys this atmosphere and a flavor of fairy tales, but I also appreciate how George MacDonald is one of those early 19th century, well, not early writers in the late 19th century who really started taking the child and the youth seriously. So he not only has these elements of mystery and the fantastic, but he also includes a real consciousness of the complexity of childhood and of identity of the child, which is something that wasn't really developing fully, this psychological complexity in young adult and children's stories. It was just beginning really at this time. So MacDonald was pretty influential in that respect as well. One thing that I looked at in my research a few years ago was one of MacDonald's other stories that I'm not talking about too much today. It's called The Wise Woman or The Lost Princess. It has two different titles. And in that story, it tells two different narratives about two young women as they're learning different lessons and sort of coming of age. And one thing that MacDonald does that's really fascinating is he uses the prefect self really frequently in his story. I think it's about 26 or so times in this short 30 or 40 page text. And it's self-development, self-satisfaction, self-worshipper. There's a few ways that he uses this prefect self that he introduced to English language that haven't been used by any other authors before him. So this idea of the identity of the child as being really central to MacDonald's work is an important aspect that will come up in The Light Princess, the story that we're talking about today. So in The Light Princess, it is a tale much like Sleeping Beauty. You have a young princess being born and then cursed right at her christening by a wicked witch, and eventually she has some sort of interaction with a prince figure who is involved in her breaking the curse. Now, The Light Princess does some things that are pretty different from the Sleeping Beauty narrative, especially in the original and dark forms. So let's take a look at that. The version that I'm using today is from this collection called The Princesses by Sally Patrick Johnson. And it is from the 60s, I think 1962. And as you can see, it has been well loved. It's a beautiful and somewhat falling apart copy. But that's the best sort of copy, really. So in The Light Princess, you have this initial christening, and MacDonald has this wonderful sense of humor that he infuses throughout all of his texts. And the Wicked Witch is actually the princess's aunt. She's the king's sister, who has sadly was not invited to the princess's christening. But she went anyway, and the king forgot that he had invited her, thought that everything was fine. Everything was not fine. So the Wicked Witch decides that she's going to curse the princess, and she curses her with being light of spirit and light of body. She has this cute rhyme that she says, "Light of spirit by my charms, light of body every part, never weary human arms, only crush thy parents' hearts." So it's very funny, but at the same time a serious curse. So what happens? As you may guess, the light princess becomes light, not in terms of sunshine and candlelight, but actual gravitational lightness, where gravity ceases to work on her. So she's light, and not only is this a physical transformation, but it is also a mental one, where in the older sense of the word light, she is lighthearted. So she no longer can cry, she no longer experiences those emotions. She's constantly happy, constantly smiling. And I think it's fascinating that George MacDonald recognized not only the necessity of sadness in childhood development, but also the negativity of only focusing on happy emotions all the time. So I think that's really powerful. It has both character and physical implications. Now, at the very end, she does have a prince come in, and this won't be total spoilers, but it is interesting to note that the prince does perform an act of service towards her, but does not save her. In fact, she's the one that rows the boat and physically and emotionally, mentally saves her, him, everyone, the kingdom. They all live happily ever after. So it is a powerful tale for that as well. Now, one last note on this work, you should definitely go read it. You can also find it in George MacDonald's collected fairy tales. And there was a 2013 production of it, a musical production in London's West End, starring Rosalie Craig, which received some mixed reviews. Some people were kind of unhappy with the more moralistic elements in MacDonald's work, and they thought that the main actress did an excellent job, but overall it was not super successful. So I would be really interested in seeing a translation of this in a contemporary setting, whether in a book or anything like that. If you know of any books or poems that address the Light Princess, this story, just let me know in the comments. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.